Thank you so much for your warm, lovely introduction. And thank you so much. You know, I have known Ambassador Bouran for some time, since you came to Washington. And as far as I'm concerned, Ambassador Bouran is the ambassador of all ambassadors. Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to have you, and I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Especially coming to our new building here at New York University at DC's. I've been thinking about this evening and asking myself, what should I talk about? And what is there to talk about in terms of, when you look at the region and I see Jordan in that map, and I ask myself, is there any other country in the Middle East that have seen so much going on in the last 30, 40, 50 years? More than that, as a matter of fact. And I've always admired the tenacity, the creativity of the government, going back to King Hussein, of course. And I always thought to myself, it takes that kind of leadership, that kind of vision, strength, tenacity, and resolve to be able to navigate Jordan in this very treacherous, part of the world. So I want to just begin to ask you this. I know that now Jordan is absolutely flooded with Syrian refugees, resulting, of course, of the tragic ongoing civil war in Syria. How are you managing? How are you managing this horrible crisis?
Thank you so much, Professor. Thank you, Alon, for your invitation. And I would like to thank the university and your good self for your kind words and your introduction. Actually, it's a very long list, and I can start looking at people's expression about how many posts and where. And but when you are a resident in one country, and because Jordan is a small country, so whenever you are resident in Belgium, for example, you would be a non-resident in other countries, which gave me a great opportunity to know people and to know other countries as well, where I was a non-resident ambassador. But being in Brussels, knowing and understanding the European Union, and then going to Great Britain, and then to the United States, it's a great privilege for me to serve my country, my king. And I'm the first female ambassador to be appointed by Jordan. And it's an enormous privilege to be serving here in the United States. And I would want to also say that it gives me a great honor, Professor, to be here, being in this distinguished university. And we were just talking about how important is the fact that you have excelled in the outreach that you're doing. Not just that we're here having a very substantial conversation, but also due to, of course, very advanced technology, you will be able to use this in different places. And I'm very, very happy to do that and to hear that. Coming from a small country, but that has a great impact on not only the region, but the larger sphere, if I may. It gives me, again, a great pleasure and a privilege to speak about the fact that not only Jordan is withstanding the huge amounts of numbers of people that we're seeing now because of the Syrian crisis. If we go a little bit back in history, as you have alluded your good self, if you look at Jordan right now, bird's view from above, you will see that Jordan is hosting around 2 million Palestinian refugees. We have still 420,000 Iraqi refugees. And Iraqis, we still have Libyans from the changes and turmoil there. And we have, of course, 600,000 Syrian refugees that are registered with the UNHCR. Add to that, we have around 700,000 Syrians who used to, merchants, they used to just shuttle between Amman and Damascus. We didn't have visas, still we don't have visas requirements between the two countries. So you would see other merchants or seasonal workers, whenever you have olive picking or what have you, people would come, benefit from the season and go back to their country. But because of the fact that, everything started there and the crisis and the conflict, now we have, in addition to everything that I have mentioned, 700 Syrians that are not registered within the UNHCR, but they are there benefiting from the infrastructure, benefiting from water services. As Jordan has opened up its arms and infrastructure, actually, when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to schools, when it comes to electricity, when it comes to all the services. We'll go into details later on if you would allow me. But as in a general context, this is what our assessment in Jordan, when it comes to the Syrian crisis, this is by far, we look at it strategically from the political angle, from the security angle, it overweights every other crisis that we have in conflict that we have seen, what we have seen so far. And this is putting huge burden on not just the Jordanian economy, but on the socioeconomic paradigm within Jordan itself. But may I take this opportunity and
Sure.
From this podium, thank the United States, thank the people, the American people, for their support. You have been at the forefront in terms of helping Jordan so that we are able to shoulder this huge responsibility in terms of taking care and receiving the refugees and hosting the refugees. The United States, not just at the forefront in terms of helping Jordan, but you have been our voice as well in terms of addressing the international community, saying, yes, true, Jordan is a small country that has opened its arms and everything, but they need help as well. And the United States has been there with us every step of the way in terms of help and support and aid. And I cannot but say we're overwhelmed with gratitude when it comes to the help and the support of the states. Jordanians are resilient. Jordanians are very much able to adapt, and Jordanians would want also to show the world that we are able to stretch and able to host all those refugees. But we started to think of it in a different way, Alon, if I may. Sure. We said to ourselves that even if the crisis ends tomorrow, those refugees, the 600,000, are not going to go back. We will be, if I may, naive if we will think that if the crisis ends tomorrow, the refugees are going to pack and leave. From our experience, and because of the track record that Jordan has, a refugee flees instantly. That's a split-second decision to flee the country because of a danger coming your way, or a big thing that's coming, harm is coming your way. But that refugee takes them years for them to have that psychological
being prepared, yes.
preparedness
to go back.
Yeah. If we look at the 420,000 Iraqis in Jordan, we don't call them refugees, but they are in Jordan, and they are part of the intelligentsia in Jordan. They are the university doctors. They are nurses, engineers, and what have you. They work in Amman. They have licenses, but their heart and their eye is in Baghdad and on Iraq. The minute it gets better security-wise, we're sure that they're going to go back.
But Ambassador, given the numbers that you just have mentioned, the Syrians, Palestinians, Iraqis, Libyans, it seems to me as if one of every two people now living in Jordan is a refugee or came from the outside.
Absolutely.
And you indicated just now that the United States has been helpful to a great extent. What other kind of help are you getting, and from where?
We are actually. The international community has been very generous as well. But the magnitude of the crisis is huge, Professor, at the same time. I mean, when you have in one go 2,000 refugees coming your way, now you need medical assistance, now you need gloves, now you need syringes, now you need all those instant things that you need to do for them to be transferred to the camps. And may I highlight one important factor. The 600,000 refugees are not all in camps. Only 20% of the 600,000 are camps. The rest are distributed in our towns and cities, and thus putting more pressure on the different sectors of Jordan, meaning that there's competition over the workplace, there's competition over the resources, and there is also overwhelmingly big pressure on our schools as well. Just a small example, we have incorporated in our schools 78,000 Syrian children, refugee children in our schools. 40,000 are still outside the schools.
Right.
We can't control, can you imagine that? And Jordan has always taken pride in the education system. We have invested in it. We have invested big time in terms of the human resources. And we pride ourselves that the knowledge economy is part and parcel of our developmental schemes. And with the help of the United States and the USAID, we have long time ago departed from the two-shift system. And we are like now the countries, the advanced country, we used to, one-shift system. But because of the refugees and because of the crisis, now we're back to the two-shift system. The medical services. Jordan is one of the first country ever in the Middle East that we did the open heart surgery by a Jordanian. We're linked to Mayo Clinic, we're linked to many of the esteemed establishments here in the... So there is this investment in us, in the human capital, if I may, that is able to deliver, able to give, able to say. But as you have rightfully said, it's overwhelming.
Now being of course, that there is tremendous economic pressure on the country, are you concerned about any political ramifications that might evolve over time, and you have so many people from so many different places? Do you have any concern that this may develop some kind of political implication that is going to impact the system, the political system within Jordan itself?
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, the worry is mostly probably demographic, on the demography side, as well as from the economic side. We are very well aware of the fact that the open borders might have or produce some elements here and there. But we are very much alert, and we have our own precautions when it comes to that.
But if you said the majority, and I know from our experience with the Palestinians, for example, they will probably remain, many of them will remain in Jordan, and they will not be in a hurry to go back to Damascus or elsewhere. Over time, isn't that going to develop some kind of, because you have extremists, you have all kind of groups, Islamists, who they have their own agenda. Don't you think that's going to eventually impact on the socio-political conditions that exist in Jordan?
That is why we have been focusing all the factors that I have and the challenges that I have just listed. We have been focusing on our internal social political fabric as well. His Majesty and the government has been ahead of the curve when it came to the political and economic reform that Jordan have overtaken.
But then again, how do you control, for example, they're talking about Geneva II to be convened next month. We don't know what's going to happen in Syria. What is going to, regardless of the outcome, is going to have direct and indirect repercussions on Jordan. How do you see, what kind of an outcome, from your perspective, that's going to have less implications, security, political and otherwise, on Jordan?
Absolutely. That is why Jordan has stated from the very beginning, Professor, that the only solution for Syria is a political solution. I mean, it has to be political, because God knows nobody wants another war in our part of the world. And this is what His Majesty this is what the government in Jordan has been talking about since the very, very beginning of the Syrian crisis, because it's not a humanitarian issue, it's a political issue. The humanitarian aspect is an overspill of the political crisis that is happening inside Syria, of the war and the conflict and what have you. What we see is the overspill. Now, what we believe that the new Syria will have to attract people from outside, its own citizens, to go back. And this is where Geneva II is important. This is where the leadership of the United States is important.
But do you really think, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but do you really think, we talk about political solution. I have been advocating certainly a political solution. But can you imagine a solution that is going to satisfy all the players involved? We're not just talking about 30, 40 different groups fighting within Syria itself. We're talking about the larger players in the region. You have Iran, you have Russia, you have certainly Lebanon, you have the United States. All of these countries have unique interest in what's going to happen in Syria. Do you really think there's going to be any formula that is going to satisfy all the players, including the Assad regime, including the rebels, including the Syrian Free Army? What sort of a formula, political solution, albeit it should be and it may well be the only solution, what kind of a solution are we going to be able to concoct that is going to satisfy all these elements?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when Secretary Kerry and Minister Lavrov spoke and were very much adamant that Geneva II is the only way forward, this is where everyone lined behind the two countries in terms of putting the pieces together. It's difficult. Of course it's difficult. Nobody said it was easy. And nobody said that the opposition inside Syria and outside Syria resonate with, or they have the same language in terms of needs and assessments and what have you. Plus, as you have rightfully the inside political paradigm inside Syria is very much absolutely not reading from the same page. This is why to solidify the opposition is extremely important, to make sure that the opposition, it will never speak on behalf of all the Syrians, but at least to have consensus that this is a group that is able to put the first ground rules, if I may, for a future Syria that will enable all Syrians to participate in a political process and let democracy take its role. But at least what there is now a consensus on, that the Syrian oppositions that's going to go to Geneva II has a representation inside Syria. The different groups and the factions that are fighting there, we all know that they have different allegiances.
Different agenda, but then again...
And different agendas, but you have to also align in terms of Jordan. We're very much aligned with the political process that drives the process forward. Difficult as it may be, Professor Ben-Meir, it is extremely, extremely hard. But this is the only solution forward. But we have to put all our efforts towards making it work.
This is true. I'm sorry, but listen, what you're saying is, I absolutely agree. But then again, considering the current situation, the Assad government, the Assad forces are gaining ground. The rebels have been losing ground for the last few months.
Yeah, give and take.
Well, yeah, by all accounts, have been losing ground. Yeah. So do you really think, and then we've been saying all along, the United States, just about every party, Assad has to go as a precondition to any kind of political solution. Now they're no longer talking about the fact that Assad must go first. Yeah. And then the rebels, already the Syrian Free Army stated only a few days ago they are not going to participate in this conference. Do you really think a political solution, albeit is probably the only solution, can actually materialize unless you change the power structure on the ground? That is, giving the rebels the means by which to at least even the fields, so that Assad will realize that he has no choice but to negotiate in good faith. I personally don't think you're going to be able to reach any solution, political solution, unless Assad feels that if he does not fully or does not leave office, that he's going to either be killed or captured. And then you can then look possibly for a political solution. Under the current circumstances, I personally feel that Geneva II is doomed before it starts.
Well, one would argue, of course, from different angles, but being there on the ground, seeing all the atrocities and what the refugees bring with them, and what we know because of the geopolitical proximity and what have you, This is the only way forward, with all the difficulties that you have stated. Everything, I agree with you. This is something that, this is the only solution that we need to make sure that it is moving in the right direction. This is where the leadership of the United States is essential. This is where the leadership of the international community in terms of...
But do you think in the United States, are we really demonstrating the kind of leadership necessary that is going to solve the conflict, when in fact just about every single Arab country was pointing the finger to the United States, saying that that America has failed them, have failed the Syrian people because the United States did not intervene and has not, and President Obama basically, reversed gears, so to speak, in trying to, when he first decided that he's going to attack the Assad forces and then retreated from that. And so there isn't exactly that much confidence from what I see among the Arab countries that the United States will in fact change course and become far more decisive as it should have been and it should be now.
I can't speak on behalf of other countries. I speak on behalf of my government. I can say to you very confidently that we have every trust and confidence in the United States that, of course, this is a country that's very much able. This is a country that is, and the Secretary and the President that knows the areas and the issues very, very well. So when the Secretary and White House are pushing towards and working very, very diligently towards that path, they know the obstacles, they know the challenges, every detail and more of what we are discussing. And unable probably to discuss more, it's there and in the minds of your administration. And there's no way, there's no other way, Alon. There's no other way that you can solve it.
I absolutely think that the United States' role, responsibilities...
So big confidence and big faith in what Secretary Kerry and the President are trying to achieve, and the Russians as well. We believe that it's. The Geneva II is the implementation of what was agreed in Geneva I. And what is the most important resolution of Geneva I is that the political transition in Syria should be maintained with a government that should take into consideration all aspects of the political paradigm inside Syria, to be pluralistic, to be comprehensive, and to be able to conduct the election. And this is what Geneva I was all about. So when people said, yes, we agree, and Geneva II is the implementation of what was agreed in Geneva I, then we have to make sure that all the elements in the right place. Small little Jordan, which is highly affected, we have every interest in the world that this works. We have every confidence and faith in the leadership of the United States that it is able to navigate this very difficult path. There's no other solution. We don't see any other solution.
I really agree with you that the United States' role, responsibilities are indispensable. But, just let's be open about this for a moment. And I'm not trying to put you on the spot here. I know where you're coming from. And I personally still believe the United States is indispensable. That's a given. Yeah. But then the question is, how does administration have acted all along? We see what's happening in Libya. We see what's going on in Syria, in Egypt. We are watching what's happening in Iraq in the wake of the Iraq war. Why should we now believe and think that Syria is going to be the exception to the rule? And here we have a Geneva II is going to create this panacea, and then the Syrian will be happy, the Jordanians will be happy, the Israelis will be happy. I don't see this kind of magic wand that is going to be wielded by anyone and say, here it is. How that is going to happen when, in fact, I don't think we as America have demonstrated the kind of leadership necessary in order to move in that direction.
Well, as I said, Professor, this is a different crisis. And this crisis has a different magnitude that is overwhelming. And not belittling, of course, the other crises and the other conflicts in our part of the world. God knows each one of them has its own toll and impacts for years and decades to come. But since we are now focusing on the Syrian crisis, if we were having this conversation a year ago, if you would ask me, what do you think the political picture looks like inside Syria. I would say, according to our assessment, that if we take Syria, 1/3 will be with Bashar al-Assad, 1/3 will be against Bashar al-Assad, and 1/3 will be, the population sitting on the fence, not knowing what to decide and what to do. They look this way and they see what the regime is doing and the killing and what have you. They look this way and they see the opposition and some of the radical elements that have infiltrated and made Syria a battlefield, if I may. And so the 1/3 who's sitting on the fence would definitely don't know what to do. Now, even this 1/3 alone, as things progressed, Syria became very radicalized. This is at least from a Jordanian angle. I could be right and I could be wrong, but this is at least how we see it. And this is because we're close and in touch and in contact. We can see the changes that's happening inside the psyche, if I may, of the population inside Syria. Now, the 1/3, we don't see it. It's somehow more of the fact that it is very skeptical of what's happening around them. It's very difficult. This is where, for example, if you want to compare it with Iraq and what happened, I mean, the socio-political structure inside Iraq, you have 3 main groups that are more or less, in terms of percentages, more or less, there is not that big differences. But if you look at Syria and you see the ethnicities and the different groups and groupings, there are small percentages. The Alawite is 11-12%.
Yeah, but then many different. I mean, 6 or 7 major factions within.
Exactly. So this is more of a worry for us, for the world, that if the political solution does not work, this means if the God forbid, the fragmentation of Syria happens, this is even worse of a scenario. So there is an interest, there is a drive that should work.
By whom? But here there's another dimension that I think it should be explored. There's another conflict, violent one, is going on between the Shiite and the Sunni.
Yeah.
Iraq is one example. So many years after the war has ended, Shiite are killing Sunnis, Sunnis are killing Shia. Just almost every day, 30, 40, 50 people are getting killed. Yeah. Iran is a major factor. Saudi Arabia is a major factor. I think Syria, I don't know if you agree with me, but Syria has become the proxy war between Iran and Saudi Arabia. And that's an entirely different dimension to the conflict. How are we going to reconcile all of that when in fact this Shiite-Sunni conflict didn't start with Syria? That's going back centuries and centuries. And now Iran is not going to give up its influence in Syria. Saudi Arabia want to make sure that Syria come back to Arab fold. And again, as much as I would love to see a political solution, I don't see it unless we change the dynamics. And I don't see that happening. And maybe we will, since maybe we can't solve it, maybe you can solve it for me today.
Maybe if we meet a year from now, I would say, you see, Alon, I was right.
I hope so. I hope so. Let's move into something much simpler than that.
I hope so.
The Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
That's music to my ears, if you consider this as
a while ago, you and I were listening to someone very special who said, without mentioning names, that it was very optimistic that the negotiation between Israel and the Palestinians are at a point that has never been seen before. And I personally raised the question. I said, I've been working on this, writing, preaching, whatever, trying every possibility in the last 25 years. And I had doubt as to whether this particular effort by the United States is going to yield serious fruit, again, unless some major changes take place, specifically among the leaders, And what we're hearing now, there is very little, if any, progress at all is being made in these negotiations. What is your take on this at this point?
We believe that, I know, and I heard you during that meeting, and we still believe in Jordan that this is a chance that we need to capitalize on. Again, I would like very much also to highlight what in Jordan we have been really commending the efforts of Secretary Kerry and his dedication and almost day-to-day follow-up when it comes to the negotiations between the Israelis and the Palestinians. And the fact that all parties agreed that only the United States is the only party who will be able to reveal any kind of progress or not when it comes to what's happening on the ground. I too heard the assessment that this is very serious, and that all the issues, that contentious issues, are being looked at now as we speak, and it's difficult. There are successes, but there are some difficulties. Secretaries back and forth to speak to the parties. There's a deadline, and we believe that it is a chance that both parties will have to take. I was a negotiator during the peace talks with Israel, and of course it's difficult. Of course we had our ups and downs. Of course, on issues that has to do with borders and water, issues that has to do with matters of swapping some of the land, like what happened in Bakur and what have you. But in our case, and for Israel also, we went to the negotiation as a strategic choice. King Hussein, the late King Hussein at that time, said that this is a strategic choice for Jordan that we have taken, and there's no going back. And the late Rabin had the same drive and the same dedication as well. And it was difficult. We had but it takes dedication. It takes the strategic, national sort of, I want to get to that end. I want to have
But
peace.
do you really think there is today, whether in Israel, among the Palestinians, the kind of leadership, the vision, the courage to see these negotiations through?
We hope so.
Well, I mean, I hope so too, but the truth of the matter is, we have known...
because the window of opportunity, Alon, I know what you want to say. The window of opportunity is getting closer and closer. And you have even written about this volumes and volumes. But
I know, but the point is this, you have to look, say, at Netanyahu's record. He's an ideologue. He has a different set of beliefs. Mahmoud Abbas has been much more better prepared, probably more willing. But I'm not sure even that Mahmoud Abbas, with the best of intentions, he can actually deliver. Let me just give you two examples. To this day, we're still hearing the right of return is not negotiable. We're hearing Jerusalem is not negotiable on the part of the Israelis. This public narrative continues to this day, time and again. My guest here 3 weeks ago was the former Prime Minister of Israel, Alon Ben-Meir, and we had a similar discussion about these issues. And he said, we almost reached 90% of it. So what were the other 10% we have not agreed upon? That is the question. And there's still always 10%, 15%, 30% that the Israelis and Palestinians have never been able to see eye to eye in order to resolve this problem. Don't you think the time has come that since the United States is probably the only country that can make the real difference as far as Israeli-Palestinians are concerned, to come up with its own plans, framework, based on the prior agreements and from 2000, 2008 and 2009, and say, you have agreed on this set of issues, you have disagreement on this set of issues, this is the framework, we're going to have to sit down and hammer it, and there will be consequences to both Israelis and the Palestinians if they don't go along. Don't you think the time has come for that?
Well, I think it has to come from within. I'm sure the United States is very much able to do that. I don't know, but I would assume that there is a framework or something that is that could be put on the table and what have you. But I would probably think of the whole thing from a different perspective, because I was in the process itself. If it doesn't come from within, if it doesn't come from the parties themselves, if it doesn't come from the conviction that this is an agreement that is bound for life, then it is very difficult to sustain it like we did with Israel. I mean, the relationship and after the peace agreement in Wadi Araba in 1994, I mean, of course, we had difficulties here and there, but at the end of the day, it's sustained and it's moving. Yes. The foundation of it was based on a mutual understanding, mutual respect, understanding that this is a strategic goal for both countries, and this is how you do it. Probably if it is put from above, if there are enough grounds for that, I don't know. I wouldn't even presume to say that I would know or don't know this, but being a negotiator myself, I think that it has to come from the parties themselves.
This is absolutely true.
I think that was very wise from Secretary Kerry when here in the State Department it was announced that no negotiations are across the airwaves, and everything that is being negotiated is kept close to the heart of the negotiators themselves, so that we don't fall into the rhetoric of, you know, incitements here, you know, articles there, and so on and so forth, so that it does not derail the substance of the negotiating efforts that's happening. And I think this is done for the first time ever, that nothing is leaked, if I may use the word, and the only party who's able to speak on behalf of the parties themselves is the United States. So I would just give it more, both of us, give it more faith, give it more...
You know, there is nothing I wish more than to see in my lifetime an Israeli-Palestinian peace. That's been my dream for more than 2 decades.
We have been an advocate of the two states.
Well, you know that. But the two elements, you mentioned has to come from within.
Yeah.
You know, polls after polls are taken in Israel and among the Palestinians suggest 65 to 70% support peace agreement based on a two-state solution.
Thank you. Absolutely.
But then again, the public, you have not seen a single demonstration, be that among the Palestinians or the Israelis, going into the street and say, enough is enough. We want the government to listen to our voices. Not once have you seen any significant major demonstration taking place. So where are the people? The Israelis are complacent at best, and the Palestinians perhaps feeling hopeless or helpless so they can do anything about it. And that's one element. The second element that is missing is leadership. Anwar Sadat was a brave man. He paid for his life, but he took the initiative and he forged peace with Israel. King Hussein, was a great man. He also had the courage to forge peace in 1994 with Israel. So there was the visionary, strong, powerful, courageous leadership that actually made the difference. Rabin was one of those that also paid for it with his life because he tried to do that.
Yeah.
Where are these leaders today? So it takes, yes, from within, you need to have the people themselves to come out and say enough is enough. What happened like in North Ireland? The women, finally they said, we're not going to take it anymore. The Protestant as well as the Catholic held hands and went out to the street by the thousands and thousands say, enough is enough bloodshed. We don't see that happening in the Middle East because there is another dimension to the conflict, and that is they are stuck. They have been stuck for the last 65 years. There is this, which I mentioned, I'm writing this book about the psychological implication. I don't think they can see the light because the narrative that's been used by the leadership for the last 5-6 decades continue to deepen the perception that this is my enemy and I have to and that is what
you reminded me of a wonderful organization that does exactly this. When I was in London, I was introduced to an NGO actually called One Voice. They are young people, young Israelis and young Palestinians that do exactly this, Professor. And when I first met them, it was at the House of Lords, and because there was a function there. And there was the Palestinian boys and girls and Israeli boys and girls. The boys and girls from Israel, all of them, they have served in the army. And many of the boys and girls of 18, 19, 22, 26, that kind of age range, many of them were Intifada children, and many were in the streets and what have you. And now they are together and doing door-to-door in the West Bank as well as inside Israel. And I was amazed when I got inside the hall, where the whole group, there was 20 or 30 with them, and Baroness Heyman was there as well. I couldn't distinguish who's a Palestinian, who's an Israeli.
This is very true.
And this is what they do. That's why I'm saying that the civil society and the non-governmental organizations need probably to fill in the gap when it has to do with the aspiration of the people, when it has to do with yes, we want peace with the Palestinians, yes, we want peace with the Israelis. The security of Israel is extremely important. I'm a mother too. I know how important for an Israeli mother to make sure that her kids come back from the malls and hanging places where the children are. My children are exactly, they do that. I mean, so I know, I feel this, and I know how important this is. But this kind of approach has to be said. It has to be reflected. It has to be gone from. It will inspire the leaders.
Yes.
With the leadership of the United States again, with the dedication of Secretary Kerry. I mean, there's lots of those again, but I was impressed with One Voice, and I know that they have been doing that for a long time, and I think it's more than 65% of people who would say, yes, the two-state solution is the way forward. Yes, we want peace with the Palestinians. Yes, we want peace with the Israelis. Enough is enough.
Yeah, I think, look, I know One Voice, and we've been working with them sometime directly and indirectly, and I think they do a good job. But it's a minuscule in terms of.
We need more of those. If this is diversified.
A great deal more. But the one thing that is, is really a puzzle for me. Here you have Netanyahu talking about two-state solution, but then the settlement continued to expand.
Yeah.
Mahmoud Abbas talked about two-state solution, but he is putting also conditions that probably will not be acceptable to the Israelis. So one thing that I think the United States should be doing is also among the fact that you have to sit down, you have to negotiate, this is fine, but they have to also start to change their public narratives simultaneously. That is, Mahmoud Abbas and Netanyahu should say, we start to talk to the public. Look, we had a different expectation. Coexistence is not one of many choices, it's the only choice. Yeah. We have to decide how we're going to live. Yeah. And so we're going to have to make compromise on Jerusalem. We have to compromise on the Palestinian refugees. You need to appeal already to the public. The public knows nothing about these negotiations, even if there is a progress. Yeah. And I submit to you, and you were involved in 2008 and 2009, and we know, and before that, the public was not prepared, for example, in 2000, Palestinian, that there will be no right of return for all intent and purposes. Arafat insisted that he will not sign on the dotted line because he said, I'm not in a position to sign for the next generation, that they have no right to go back. So what I'm saying is the public need to be involved 100%. So that they'll be preparing themselves for the inevitable. Yeah. It's the inevitable. The inevitable, they have to coexist. They have to choose, do they want to kill each other for the next 100 years? Exactly. Or do they want to live peacefully because they have no choice? They are stuck.
Exactly.
Basically, they're stuck there.
May I also add one thing which is extremely important when it comes to Jordan? True, we have availed the Jordan for negotiations. True, we have availed for rounds and rounds of negotiations before it was announced here in the White House and what have you. And we have managed to bring the parties together and avail the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Jordan for the closed doors sort of negotiations, because there was once a gap of, I think, 16 months or more when the two parties were not speaking. But I would like to highlight an important factor here, if I may. Jordan, we're not doing this just for the two-state solution, and the strategic interest is 100%, but also Jordan is a stakeholder as well. We're not doing this just for the photo op. We're not doing this for the photo op. We're not doing this just because we're availing the proximity and what have you. When it comes to the final status negotiations, Jordan is a stakeholder. When you negotiate the refugees, how can not Jordan be involved in this when we host the largest number of refugees outside the territories? How can you negotiate and speak about Jerusalem when the Jordanian-Israeli peace treaty in its 9th article says that the Hashemites are the custodians for both the Muslim and the Christian places? Until a time comes, the Palestinian state will be able, this will going to be transferred to the future Palestinian state. How are you going to negotiate in the final status the borders when in the final analysis maybe there is a trilateral point where Jordan's border is in there alongside with Israel as well as the future Palestinian state? When you speak about water, when you speak about aquifers, when you speak about borders and security. So this is something that is not just for us a bypassing matter. It's not something for us that the Palestinians and the Israelis are very much engaged and with the help of the United States and everything. This is all we supported 100%. But also, in addition to all this, the strategic interest, the national strategic interest of Jordan is by far a central core when it comes to that.
To what extent are you being consulted? I mean, are you part of, because from what I know, there is no even an observer, a Jordanian observer at this negotiation. Is there one?
Well, I wouldn't presume I would know the details of what's happening right now, but I would know that our interests are very much taken care of.
I would like that to see that happen. So, I know you need to leave on time, so I'm going to turn to the audience for some questions. Ambassador Bouran has another engagement, so we have to conclude in about 17 minutes or a little before that. And so we'll take a few questions from you, and we'll take it from there. So please just raise your hand, and I acknowledge you. Please limit yourself to questions rather than commentary, all right? Thank you so much. Go ahead, please.
Thank you for being here, Madam Secretary, or Madam Ambassador. I apologize. Is Jordan comfortable, or does it feel comfortable in its relationship in the efforts that Turkey might also be presenting, so as to have some cohesion within the region on opposite sides of Syria that you think might be built upon?
All efforts are very much welcomed by Jordan. Again, this is my point, Sarah, from the very beginning. The humanitarian overspill that we're seeing is a byproduct of the political crisis inside. No matter how countries would help Jordan to be able to cope, no matter how the United States is putting its own resources with the difficulties that the United States have, which we are ever grateful for, no matter how each and every country is doing its bit, but there must be a resolve for the crisis so that the refugees will stop flowing, so that there is stability inside. Each and every country, Turkey has its own burdens also in terms of the refugees. Lebanon has its own burden in terms of the refugees. So each and every country around Syria is suffering because of this. And we very much welcome the efforts that countries would have as an input to put an end to this conflict or crisis.
Okay.
Marhaban. Sorry. Thank you for coming. And excuse me. What improvements is the Jordanian government making so that it can better serve its citizens? Thank you.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? I don't think it was clear.
What improvements is the Jordanian government making so it can better serve its citizens, like reforms or things like this?
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Well, actually, this is an important question, and I thank you for it. We unfortunately tend to when we speak about Jordan, start looking at the crisis and the refugees and the numbers and this and that, and the core essence of the stability of Jordan is because we are able to look inward as well. We are able to cater for the people as well. If you look at the beginning of the Arab Spring, and you look at the turmoil that have swept the Arab world in terms of the demonstrations and needs and aspirations, and people wanted this, and legitimately so, 100%. Jordan, the leadership of His Majesty, has always been ahead of the curve in terms of accommodating to the needs of Jordanians. And the different steps that we have taken were very much in consistency of what His Majesty wanted to do long time ago. When His Majesty became king, and when the Arab Spring started, His Majesty would say, this is what I want to do. This is an eye-opener. This is an opportunity for Jordan to be able to drive the reform process that His Majesty wanted so much. It's not that Jordan doesn't have a parliament or we don't have a constitution or anything, but there's always this need to evolve. There's always this need to make it better. There's always this need inside Jordanians to be able to accommodate better. For example, there was an assessment during the the National Dialogue Committee that there is a need for more or to mainstream the political parties, better participation by the different groups that represent different ideas and what have you. So there was this consensus amongst Jordanians that this is where we want to move from this point to point B. And so the government and the different stakeholders, parties, opposition, drafted a roadmap, political roadmap for Jordan. Each and every step that was put was implemented. Municipal elections were done. The government now, for the first time, it is in consultation with the parliament, in preparation for the first ever government that is coming from full parliamentarian members, and so on and so forth. And we take pride in the different steps that we have taken. It's very much caters for Jordanians. This is exactly what people wanted to see, and this is exactly what we're having in terms of political and economic reform. In terms of the economics of the whole thing, this is where the difficulty and this is where the challenge is. When we had the Iraqi refugees and the Iraqis at that time from the war, it was before 2008. So Jordan, this is a country that used to grow 7 to 8% in terms of growth. We were at a better position finance-wise to be able to cater for the needs of the Iraqi refugees at that time, plus the fact that probably the category is totally different in terms of capabilities and abilities. But now, add to that, after the Arab Spring and after the 2008 economic crisis, all this contributed to the slowdown of the Jordanian economy. Also, the interruption of the Egyptian gas drove the Jordanian government to borrow from the IMF, from the International Monetary Fund, adding yet another burden on Jordan. But we take all this as correctional measures. We take this as a country that should not be doing subsidies. True, we're doing it the hard way with the IMF because this is a very strict program. We're very much committed to that, and the government have announced many times that this is the steps that we're taking, and we are doing that. But it is definitely at the expense of the prices, and there's a difficulty for Jordanians to be able to cope in terms of the inflation, in terms of the expensive lifestyle that's becoming, unfortunately, in Jordan, due to the fact that we are unable, it's stretched, our resources are very much stretched. But would you see a Jordanian that would say, I'm not going to do that for the Syrian refugees? Never. I would also say that at the beginning of the crisis, when we used to have 5,000, 10,000, when we had 20,000 refugees, we said, oh my God, 20,000 refugees. People open their houses. If you have an extra room in your house, you would give it to a refugee family and no questions asked. If people are a little bit well off, You would give a whole building if you are in real estate, until this moment. But when it comes to competition over the workplace, when it comes to the recent statistics that says that Jordanians have lost 160,000 jobs to Syrians, this is where little bit it becomes more difficult. Down the line, and if it's a textbook sort of conflict areas, something that happens to country where there's an overspill of the refugees, it's a textbook sort of example of host communities deal with that. But we are strong, we're resilient, we're very much confident of the political reform steps that we have taken. If you are in Jordan now, we have a very, very active parliament, that we have very active opposition. And it is the beginning of many steps that Jordan is going to take in terms of political reform.
You said resilient and strong, and I think without any question, but I would add to that, Jordan, and I've seen this up close for years and years and years. No country in the Middle East has demonstrated the kind of compassion, hospitality that Jordan has demonstrated over the years. I want you to know, I'm sure many of you probably do, Jordan is the only country that offered the Palestinian, when they en masse refugees to Jordan, full citizenship to the Palestinian. No other Arab country has done so to this very day. So Jordan, without any question, occupies a special place in my heart as well. Trust me on that one. We'll take another question.
Thank you. We would share the little bit that we have, gladly.
Question? Yes, sir.
You mentioned the Iraq refugees. Looking back at it now, those refugees, from what I understand, many of them came from the middle class and upper class. So what was the net economic effect on Jordan? Was it positive, or did it lead to a lot of inflation with a lot of money chasing fewer goods?
Thank you for that question. Actually, it's different. The Iraqi refugees were of three categories. The first category are the very much able, wealthy, those people who are able to invest in New York, in Abu Dhabi, in Dubai, in Jordan, in London. So we had a good percentage of that category in Jordan, buying real estate, investing in Jordan, and having a positive impact on the economy. The second category of Iraqis were the professionals, were the doctors, the nurses, the lawyers, the university professors that are till this day present in Jordan. So this is a win-win, if I may, because Iraqis have their own culture and wealth and learning and knowledge, and so and Jordanians as well. So there is this give and take in terms of research, in terms of enriching the experience of each other. The third category, and this is the second category that would, we believe, go back to Iraq when the situation and the security situation becomes better, because the number fluctuates. You look at 420, then 380, and then 5. I mean, it's a very fluctuating number, but the average is the 40 to 20,000. The third and the last category are the very needy, the ones that have fled just with their clothes on, and they have absolutely nothing. You see them on the streets of Amman, unfortunately in need, but creating a shadow economy that the government is not very comfortable with. So it is a different assessment for the different social, financial groups that came from Iraq. In contrary to this, when you look at the Syrian refugees, you don't see the higher categories of the Iraqis that I have mentioned. You find the second category and the the large, the bigger percentage is the ones that are very much in need of work and what have you. Now, we have been noticing at one point that the numbers of the refugees would drop. For example, it would, one day we have 2,000, other day we have 600, and then we have 400. It depends on the intensity of the fight. It depends on the people are able to get to the borders or not. But having said that, the largest percentage of the Syrian refugees is from the south, is from the Daraa area. Comes after that from Homs and from rural Damascus and rural areas. And many, a good percentage, I think 10%, no, 8% of them would walk from nearby the Turkish borders to get to the Jordanian borders and to be able to cross when there is a safe period of time, there is no fighting on the borders. But then again, this is all good, and our old borders are open, we're committed to that. But at the end of the day, can you imagine the pressure over the natural resources that we're taking? Can you imagine? Because we have opened the schools, we have opened the medical care, we have opened, I mean, everything that we can think of. You don't see here just Jordanians or just, we don't do this. Especially, and the government just opened all the facilities for everyone. And my examples at the very beginning are very true. If you are in Amman right now, any school you would enter, especially in the northern governorates, you would see that they are working 2 shifts. You will see Syrian kids sitting side by side, Iraqi kids sitting side by side, Jordanian kids. So this is where the strength of Jordan, this is where we believe that education is important. Those children are displaced. They are, of course, refugees. They are maybe orphans, 1 or 2 parents. So if angry children, they don't know what happened, all of a sudden they are in a different country and they are called refugees. So if you leave them unattended to, if you leave them without education, then definitely, God forbid, I mean, they will either be lured into being radicalized or taught wrong lessons or put, in a situation where they are unable to separate right from wrong. So education for us is a tool. Education for us is a strategic option when it comes to the Syrian refugees. And it is a pride that we take in terms of doing that.
I think we have one more time for one question, short one, but the answer is up to you.
Yes.
Where is this? Where's the person? You have the question. Okay. You are entitled.
Yeah, that never happens. So 50% of Jordan's population is now under the age of 30. And when you consider how many young people are coming from Syria, and you spoke a little bit about education, but are there any economic reforms or governmental reforms? Do you see the government structure or the way it interacts with its citizens changing in light of these new demographics?
Is the demographic changing?
Yeah,
Is
that
the
the
demographic
population is
changing?
increasingly youthful. And
I probably wouldn't worry about changing the demographic for the time being. Maybe the resilience and maybe because of the internal structure of Jordan is very solid. That is why we are able to host. That's why we are able to have a large number of people, because of the confidence of the internal system and of the leadership that Jordan enjoys and enjoyed for so many years. But may I add one thing here, and this goes back to our earlier discussion when I said that it will be very, and I use the word naive, to think that the refugees will just go back, even if the crisis finishes the day after tomorrow. That is why the government has started to think of long-term options in terms of medium-term hosting the refugees, and in terms also of services. For example, instead of bringing bottled water to the refugee camp, to the Zaatari camp every day, why not think of a project, of a developmental project that would serve the hosting communities who also have a huge burden on themselves, and at the same time it will benefit the refugees, and it is sustainable. Why not, for example, think of a solar system instead of pumping so much the electricity into the Zaatari camps and all the camps that are, and rightfully so, because you need the security and you need it to be very much lit and everything. Also, although this is, as I said, a country that imports 96% of its oil, and therefore it's huge cost. Why not think outside the box? Why not say, let's think of, and we're approaching the donors and the donor community, and from this podium I would like also to address this matter of establishing a plant or factory that produces solar cells, for example, that would generate electricity. This way it will serve the hosting community who are in need as well. And they have shared the little that they have with the refugees, but at the same time it would be sustainable after the refugees, God willing, go back to their country. So this is where we have changed the dynamics and the political language in terms of receiving the refugees, which we're doing and we are committed to do, but at the same time we have an obligation towards the host communities, and which are doing a great sacrifices as well. So it's important to put that positive platform in terms of development and to create a sustainable service that would definitely cater for their need and for the refugees as well, and stay much more beyond the crisis itself.
Well, thank you so much for your taking the time. I think it was a wonderful what you've said. And this is to tell you here, the ambassador, that absolutely exemplify what Jordan is all about. And thank you again for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it so much. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. You're very kind. Thank you.